Hey everyone, Jeff here, and unfortunately I think that James Cameron might be messing with more of his 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray releases that are coming out later this year. Hey everyone, thanks for coming back to the channel. Now in this video we're going to talk about James Cameron and his upcoming Titanic and Avatar 4K Blu-ray releases, which have been all but confirmed for later this year or early in 2023. And I really want to talk about James Cameron and his handling of his movies because, as you may know, Terminator 2 on 4K was a bit of a disaster. So James Cameron, of course, is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. He has hit after hit after hit under his belt, always is creating new technologies and getting very innovative with his filmmaking, which is awesome. He's constantly on the cutting edge of filmmaking technology. But I think, like a George Lucas, he tends to not be satisfied with his final product. Now, when Terminator 2 came out on 4K, that was a Cameron supervised transfer that was done by Studio Canal, and he added a ton of DNR, or digital noise reduction, to totally smooth out that image. He added in some extra CGI to try to fix some things, a la George Lucas and Star Wars. He just kind of messed with the picture and ultimately left us with a very subpar, maybe the worst 4K release of all time when it came to Terminator 2. Now, there's news that came out this week that Cameron is going to be playing with high frame rates on his 4K transfers and eventual 4K theatrical and Blu-ray releases of Titanic and Avatar, which are probably two of his top three biggest movies along with Terminator 2. Most people probably know Cameron for Titanic and Avatar, especially people my age, this generation. If you're a little bit older, you probably know him for Terminator 2 or Aliens, but it's a little disappointing that he's messing with high frame rate. So let me tell you what high frame rate is. Let me tell you what he's doing with these movies and why this will affect the 4Ks. And let me tell you what my thoughts are on him meddling with all of these releases. So to start, high frame rate. So if you don't know this, Blu-rays are presented in 24 frames per second. Now, some of your TVs will upscale that to 30 frames and they'll sort of upsample it because your TV can't handle 24 frames per second. But a lot of modern TVs and higher end stuff will show your movies at 24 frames per second because that is and has been for a very long time the cinematic standard frame rate. 24 frames per second is how 99.99% of movies are shot. So you may be surprised because video games do 120 frames, 60 frames, 90 frames per second. They do these high frame rates. But for movies, that's not true. It's 24 frames per second. And if you go up to 60 frames per second or you turn on motion smoothing type technologies on your TV, that's where you start to get that real soap opera effect that is just really ugly. It drives me nuts whenever I see it. So you don't want motion smoothing. You don't want a higher frame rate. If you want a cinematic look and feel, you want the original 24 frames per second. Now, a high frame rate, or HFR, that's where you get up into like 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second. The most well-known director who's played with this is probably Ang Lee. He did this for the long halftime walk with Billy Lynn. I think that's the name of the movie. It's a crazy title, but he was doing things at high frame rates. And then Gemini Man, he shot at 120 frames per second. Super high frame rate. Both of those 4K Blu-rays were downscaled to a 60 frames per second presentation. And while that looks great in some really high-paced action sequences, it can make the rest of the movie look a little bit fake. That soap opera effect, it can be a little too smooth. It can be a little bit uncanny valley. You don't expect that from a movie. It almost starts to look like a video game. So Titanic and Avatar, these were movies that would use 24 frames per second. Avatar obviously had some 3D effects and there was some stuff going on there, but they're 24 frames per second at their source. And James Cameron, funny enough, came out just a couple years ago and said that high frame rate is not a usable technology, is not going to be the future. It can be used in some small areas where 3D effects need a higher frame rate to make 3D look better, but overall, he said it was kind of a gimmick and he wasn't a fan of what Ang Lee was doing. Now, just a couple years later, we have this news that's broken this week that James Cameron is going to do high frame rate transfers of Titanic and Avatar. So what this means is that on the Titanic and Avatar 4K theatrical re-releases and the eventual physical media releases, you're probably going to have some of the movie be either 48 frames per second, 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second. He's going to mess with the original image to try to put some revisionist type technology on top of it, which I'm never a fan of. Now, we don't know which frame rate he's going to use. Now, famously, the Hobbit movies used 48 frames per second, and people hated that in the movie theaters. He could go that route. He could go 60 or 120 like Ang Lee did, and we don't know how much of it he's going to use. But it's just a little disturbing that, again, he's taking two of his massively well-known titles, Titanic and Avatar, and is messing with them for 4K releases. And I have to say, I am curious how they're going to look, but I know I'm not going to like them because they're not going to look like how I remember them and how I've seen them on DVD, Blu-ray, VHS, everything going back to theaters with Avatar. So he's messing with it again, and this is a disturbing trend for James Cameron when he's messed with Terminator 2, and I think really butchered that on 4K. I'm really nervous about what he's doing with Titanic and Avatar, and this doesn't bode well for other stuff that's coming out, like The Abyss or maybe True Lies or Aliens or all of his other great movies. I just don't want him to keep screwing with his original vision because he's inching closer and closer and closer to George Lucas revisionist sort of side of things, and I don't think anybody really appreciates that or wants that from their original movies. So we'll see, but luckily, we are getting Avatar and Titanic on 4K Blu-ray at some point, maybe later this year, maybe early 2023, but he's working on them. I just wish he would use the original source and just stick with what he has rather than revising what I think were probably going to be two very good 4K Blu-rays on their own. That's it for the video. Just wanted to give you guys this quick update and see what you guys thought about this high frame rate stuff, whether you've seen The Hobbit or Gemini Man or Billy Lynn, or whether you're looking forward to Avatar and Titanic in high frame rate. I can't say that I am. I'm a bit of a purist, but to each their own. So let me know what you guys think about this news and what you think about James Cameron. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss updates or reviews like this. Follow us on social media. All the links are in the description: Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Find me over there, and of course check out all the links down in the description for our partners who support me, and you can help support the channel by using their links and all of my different discount codes. So thanks for watching, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe and healthy out there, and I'll talk to you soon.